This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Whoa. I guess you guys can't hear when Zoom says recording in progress. It's very loud on my end. Good morning, guys. It is Friday morning, and I never record the podcast in the morning, so this will be exciting. Once again, I'm here with this giant disc thing in my face that I absolutely hate. I just ordered something called a furry windshield for the microphone, so I can hopefully get rid of this. And it's just like a furry thing that you put on top of the microphone. I had to take a sip of water, and now I'm so paranoid that you're going to like hear me swallowing in the microphone. I don't want to do that. So today, I know I never put episodes out on Friday, but I'm going to do the mini crime episode today because I have not literally had a chance to do it prior to this. When I was going to do it Wednesday, we had some rain and my internet was out. And then yesterday was just crazy. So I also have a bunch of things I want to talk about and catch up on. So I may do a little bonus after this, even though I know this is a bonus. I'm going to use this to just tell the mini crime story and not spend too much time talking about things. I saw another review, and I know everyone says don't pay attention to the bad reviews, just keep doing what you're doing, and I am obviously continuing to do what I do, whatever that is. And but I still read the reviews and comments because good, bad, or indifferent, I think it's helpful. And I saw one from Wednesday that says, tried listening to the yogurt shop murders, and the beginning is so rambling and boring, I couldn't continue. Host goes on at length about unrelated topics, which is a completely fair evaluation and true. But if you are a regular listener, you know that I am making an effort to really cut down on the rambling, cut down on the extended intros, and save all of my talking to hear myself talk for miscellaneous, just bonus episodes that are entirely just rambling and talking. So I have so many things to talk about with you guys, but I'm not going to do that right now. We're going to jump into our mini crime story. And this is a weird one to do as a mini crime story because it's a big story. This could be a multi-episode episode. However, it does not take place in the Southwest. So it's going to exist as a mini crime story. And I'll be completely honest, this one is so disturbing to me that I think keeping it short was the only way I could tell this. I believe there's probably a lot more info out there than what I'm about to share with you. But it's a pretty disturbing one. So I'll say that up here at the top. And it does involve children. And there's a good chance maybe you've heard it. Who knows? I had never heard this. Okay, I think I gave enough what do you call that when you like over explain something before the fact? I realize I don't need to do that. I could just jump in. And one more note on the not talking forever at the beginning of the episode. I'm doing a great job, right? I was listening to another podcast the other day, and there was all kinds of other information beyond. It was a true crime podcast, and I'm not going to say what it was, but beyond the murders and the true crime, there was all this other kind of stuff. Now, it wasn't the host rambling about their own life. It was the host rambling about other events and this and that, which were adjacent to the main story. But I found myself being like, come on, let's get to the murder. Like, let's get to the true crime aspect of it. I want to know more about the victims. I want to know more about, and then I thought, oh, got it. Yeah, this is how people feel when they listen to me. So I'm going to keep that in mind. And with that being said, let's jump in. Keith Dardeen was 29 years old, and his wife, Elaine, was 30 years old, and they were living what many people would consider a simple, peaceful life. They lived in the rural town of Ina, Illinois. a town that was so tiny you could drive right through it in about a minute and a half. Keith worked as a treatment plant operator at the Rend Lake Water Conservancy District, while Elaine had a job at an office supply store. They were very active at their Baptist church. Keith sang lead vocals, and Elaine played the piano. By all accounts, they were the kind of couple, the kind of people that other people admired. They were kind, hardworking. They seemed to be deeply in love and genuinely happy with each other and their life together. They had a 2 to 3 year old son, Peter, and they were expecting their second child any day now. It was a girl, and they had picked out names: Ian for a boy, Casey for a girl. I don't think they knew what it was at this point. While they are preparing for this new kind of chapter in their life, Keith, in his own mind, is preparing for something else. Keith wanted to get out of Ina, Illinois, because by 1987, which is when our story takes place, there was a big problem. Ina was changing. And not in the way that small towns kind of evolve when like a new Walmart or Target opens or they put in a new stoplight in town. This was something else entirely. For 2 years, something had been happening in and around this small stretch of Jefferson County, something that no one could explain. And it was something terrifying. Murder. Not just 1 or 2 murders, 15 murders, 15 homicides in 2 years. And for a town that barely had 450 people in it, this is an astronomical. It is astronomical. It's an astronomical number. So this isn't just like a couple murders. This isn't just crime. This is a crisis that Ina, Illinois is going through. For the first time ever, people are locking their doors. Parents aren't letting their kids to go out and play. Remember, this is the 80s. So I was born in the 80s and, playing outside, riding our bikes throughout the whole entire neighborhood without a care in the world was just the norm. And in Ina at this time, parents were not allowing that to happen anymore. There was a real heaviness, a tension kind of hanging over this small town that hadn't been there before. And Keith felt it. He wasn't typically a paranoid type of person. He wasn't the type to get caught up in small town gossip or just believe the rumor mill. But there was something about this string of murders that just didn't sit right with him. And I mean, probably because they were murders happening in his very small town. One of the first major cases to send shockwaves through Jefferson County happened in 1985, about 2 years before our story takes place. A 17-year-old named Thomas Odell murdered his entire family, his parents and his 3 younger siblings, murdered them in cold blood inside their home in Mount Vernon, which was just about 20 minutes away from Ina. The case was obviously very brutal. Thomas waited until each member of his family came home, and then one by one, he slaughtered them. His parents were stabbed over 50 times each, and his youngest sibling was only 10 years old. People were horrified, rightfully so, but there was some kind of reassurance in the fact that Thomas was caught pretty immediately. He also had a reason, a motive. He had been badly abused by his parents for many, many years, and in his own words, he said that he just snapped. So once Thomas was caught, people thought, okay, things are going to get better. We can breathe more easily. But the problem was, the murders didn't stop after Thomas was arrested. In the following months, more people turned up dead under completely different circumstances each time. A woman was found murdered inside of her home. A local bartender was killed. A teenage girl was raped and murdered. And then in May of 1987, just 6 months before our story takes place, a 10-year-old girl was abducted, raped, and murdered. And that's when Keith he'd had enough. He told his mom, I want out. He told his wife, we got to get out of here. And they had already put their trailer up for sale. But Keith was waiting to find a new job somewhere else. And now he was like, I don't care. I don't need to find a new job. Let's just get the heck out of here. Keith was so uneasy about all these murders. And I feel like I need to say, of course he was uneasy. That's a lot of murders in a If there was 15 murders in Tucson in well, that doesn't work, I guess. There are 15 murders in Tucson in a year. I don't know. 450 people, it's extremely small. That would be so terrifying. So me continuing to say that this makes Keith uneasy is, it's justified, obviously. But he was not somebody who was easily spooked, I guess, is the point. And he was so uneasy about all the violence happening in his town that one night a young woman knocked on his trailer door and asked to use the phone, said that she needed help, and he refused to let her in. And that was super not like him. He was not the type of guy to turn people away. But with considering what was happening, he just wasn't willing to risk it. Unfortunately, for all of his instincts, all of the precautions that he wanted to take, he still never saw what was coming next. Because on November 18th, 1987, Keith Dardeen never showed up to work. And just 24 hours later, his entire family would be dead. On November 18th, 1987, Keith is a no-show at work. No call, no explanation. And this is very out of character. His supervisor was concerned almost immediately and called Keith's parents, which stuck out as weird to me. Keith is a grown man, 30-year-old man. Aren't you calling his wife? Maybe he did try to call the wife first, but either way, the supervisor was concerned, called Keith's parents, but they hadn't heard from him either. And at this point, that was a red flag. He talked to his parents frequently. He was responsible. He was dependable. He wouldn't just not show up for work. So Keith's father, Don, decided to drive down to Ina. He had a spare key and decided to meet deputies outside Keith and Elaine's mobile home. So obviously they had tried to, this is 1987, there aren't cell phones. So I guess if they called Elaine and no one answered at the trailer, now they're super concerned. Hence Keith's dad driving down and asking for deputies to meet him there because he was worried. So deputies met him there. He unlocked the door, and the second that they stepped inside, their worst fears were confirmed. In the master bedroom, tucked neatly into bed, was Elaine, Peter, and a newborn baby girl. All of them are dead. Elaine had been bound and gagged with duct tape, then bludgeoned so severely with a baseball bat that she had gone into labor. The baby, who would have been named Casey, was born during Elaine's attack, and there was no mercy. The killer beat the newborn to death as well. And the bat that the killer used wasn't just a random bat that they grabbed in the heat of the moment or brought with them. It was Peter's bat. It had been a gift from his dad, Keith, earlier that year. This was very clearly a rage killing of some kind. But quickly, deputies and Keith's father, Don, noticed one problem. Keith was nowhere to be found. He was missing, and so was his 1981 Plymouth. But nothing else in the family home was missing. There was items of value left in plain sight, a portable camera, a VCR player, jewelry, even cash. There was also no sign of forced entry. The natural assumption right now is that Keith is responsible. Maybe he snapped, he killed his entire family, and then took off. But less than 24 hours later, that entire theory was blown to pieces. A group of hunters, about a mile from the trailer, came across something horrific in a wheat field near Rend Lake College. A body. Keith's body. He had been shot 3 times, and his genitals had been mutilated. His penis had been severed. And his car was found 11 miles away, parked right outside the police station in Benton, with the interior covered in blood. It was almost as if whoever had done this wanted the car to be found. You don't park a car covered in blood at the police station for no reason. So, whatever had happened to the Dardeen family, it clearly was not Keith's doing. He was just as much a victim as the rest of his family. And that left investigators with a terrifying realization that there was a monster on the loose. Now, the people of Ina were already on edge, but the murder of the Dardeen family pushed them into, full blown panic. Gun sales were skyrocketing. Parents were walking their kids to and from school. High schoolers who usually hung out in parking lots after sports events and, things happening at the school, they now waited inside for their parents to come get them and escort them out. And in a small town, as you might imagine, rumors were running rampant. Was it a cult, Satanists, a serial killer? The brutality of these murders, the level of overkill had people convinced that this was something beyond what anybody could imagine, anybody's worst nightmare. Unfortunately, the investigation stalled almost immediately. Now, as I said, detectives knew this wasn't a robbery since the cash and valuables were left untouched. But beyond that, there was really very little to go on. There was no obvious motive. So again, theories are swirling. And when rumors and theories and speculation starts beginning, that's when details that could be insignificant sometimes get blown out of proportion. A detail like that came about was that the investigators found a very small amount of marijuana in the home. And people started speculating that Keith was involved in drugs, in the drug trade. He was trafficking. I think that pretty quickly was dismissed. It was a very small amount, and there was nothing to indicate that Keith had any involvement in drugs outside of perhaps occasionally smoking a little bit of pot. But, people love to jump to conclusions all the time, and especially when drugs are involved. And the town is searching for something to explain this, to like make this make sense to them. Ultimately, I think this is just kind of more of a distraction than anything. Something else that investigators wanted to explore was a sexual motive. And this is where things are a little complicated. So Elaine was not sexually assaulted, which would, typically lead people to kind of rule that out entirely. There's no sexual assault. This wasn't sexually motivated. But other people speculated that the birth of her daughter could have interrupted something. So perhaps there was going to be, or there was an attempted sexual assault, but the baby was born, and that would obviously interrupt that. And, when you're talking about a sexual sadist, sometimes just killing, the act of killing, is the ultimate goal. But there was no clear evidence pointing to this being sexually motivated. So it was pretty quickly dismissed, perhaps too quickly. But either way, there was little to no evidence pointing in any specific direction, whether it be a sexually motivated crime, outside of ruling robbery out, there was nothing else. So the case went cold very quickly, and it remained cold for years. Then in 2000, something happened, the year 2000. So we are 13. Wow, that was hard for me to do that fast math. 13 years after the crime. A man named Tommy Lynn Sells was arrested in Texas for the brutal murder of a teenage girl. And once he was in custody, he started talking. He claimed he had killed more than 70 people across the country. He confessed to one murder after another, seeming to kind of enjoy the attention. And among those confessions was the Dardeen family. Tommy Lynn Sells claimed that he had met Keith at a truck stop, or maybe it was a pool hall. His story kept changing. He said that Keith invited him home for dinner and then made an unwanted sexual advance. Or maybe the Dardeens approached him together to have a threesome. Either way, in a fit of rage, Tommy said that he killed Keith and then went back and slaughtered the rest of the family. In another version of this story, he claimed that he randomly targeted the Dardeens after seeing the for sale sign outside of their home. So you might think, great, a confession, this is solved. But the thing is that a lot of people, including law enforcement, didn't believe him. He knew some details, but pretty much everything he said had already been reported in the media. And when the investigators questioned him about specifics that weren't public knowledge, he got those things wrong. So even Keith's own mother, who initially did want to believe that Tommy Lee Sells was guilty, of course she does. You know, you want some type of closure. But she later changed her mind. She said, quote, if Keith wouldn't let a young girl in to use the phone, he sure as hell wouldn't invite a drifter inside for dinner. So to this day, despite Tommy Lynn Sells' confession, there is no physical evidence tying him to the Dardeen murders, and he was actually executed in 2014. So whatever other truths he may have had or not had about this, they died with him. In 2019, Keith's mother told a news station that she'll never give up searching for the person who killed her son and his family. She said, quote, investigators told us in the beginning that we need to keep the story out there. We need to keep it going. And here we are nearly 40 years from the original crime, and the case officially remains unsolved. No new suspects, no DNA, and no answers, which means that someone somewhere probably knows the truth. Maybe it was Tommy Lynn Sells. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe the real killer is still out there. Unfortunately, no one knows. This one leaves me with a lot of questions. I kind of wish I was trying to think about doing this one like a live streaming thing because I would love to have a conversation about it. I have so many thoughts, so many questions. One of the biggest questions for me, I mean, aside from the very obvious question of why, like who would do this and why, and so brutal. Um, but why was the family separated? Like why, and why did he? I know that typically a murderer, they'll cover their victim up or put clothes on them, do something like that, and that's a sign of remorse. It's hard for me to imagine anyone who's capable of doing this having any kind of remorse, but tucking the family back into bed, like they were perfectly, the bed was perfectly made over Elaine, Peter, and baby Casey. Um, so the killer took a lot of time to do that after they were dead. And then why were they separated? Why was Keith killed differently? First of all, he was shot rather than beaten. And why was he left, outside in the field a mile from the home while his car was parked, what was it, 11 or 15 miles away in Benton, and then the rest of his family's in the house. I mean, it's a very strange setup. Um, and it feels very personal, which is why it's pretty shocking that in such a small town where everyone kind of knows everyone, nothing ever came of this. No suspects, um, which would lead you to think it's somebody from out of town, but then they probably wouldn't know the family. And why commit such a brutal crime that really does feel personal? I mean, and those are just a few of the questions. So that's it for this very short. This was a very mini crime story. Um, and I think considering the brutality of it, for me, that's how this one needed to be. But if you liked it, if you want to know more, perhaps we could do a part two. Honestly, I don't know how much more information is out there. I mean, I looked, there is more information, but not a ton because this never went anywhere. So if you have any thoughts or theories or questions about this case, I would love to hear from you. You can, I'll say, avoid DMs on Instagram because I am way behind on those, but email, text message, voicemail, you can send a message through the website, any of those things. Please leave a review on Apple. even if it's a negative review, I still want to hear it. You can comment on Spotify, on YouTube. And if you liked this episode or any of the others, please share them with a friend or someone who you think would like the episode. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you for listening. And we by that I mean me, I will be back Tuesday with a new full true crime episode. Okay, love you guys. Bye.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, good night and good luck.